Every single day, we're all swimming in a sea of contracts. From the terms and conditions you just mindlessly clicked on to a massive multi-billion-dollar corporate merger. But what if I told you that every single one of those contracts is, well, broken? That they're all fundamentally flawed, incomplete, and just riddled with gaps? That's the fascinating and kind of unsettling reality we're going to dive into today.
Right, so that's the big question, isn't it? Why are contracts so messy? Why can't we just sit down and write a perfect agreement that covers every single possibility? I mean, it seems like we should be able to, but grappling with this problem, well, it completely changed how we understand the very architecture of our economy. You see, for the longest time, a lot of economic theory was built on this, let's call it a convenient fantasy, the idea of a complete contract. In this perfect little world, you could foresee everything, a supply chain crisis, a brilliant new invention, a global pandemic, and you'd just write down exactly who has to do what. It was a neat, clean model, but it was also completely unrealistic.
Because let's be honest, reality is messy. The future is a giant question mark, and people are even more unpredictable. And it's just physically impossible to write down rules for every single thing that could ever happen. This isn't just some minor crack in the old theory. It's a massive, gaping hole. And figuring out what fills that hole, that led to a revolution.
And that revolution was led by an economist named Oliver Hart. He looked at all those gaps in our contracts, not as some kind of failure to be fixed, but as a fundamental feature of how the world actually works. A feature with, as we'll see, some pretty profound consequences for how businesses and even whole societies get structured. And for this absolutely paradigm-shifting insight, Hart was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2016. His work really gave us a brand new toolkit for understanding the very nature of companies, of ownership, and of where power really lies in an economy.
At the core of everything is this simple but totally radical statement. Hart argued that contracts aren't just incomplete by accident or because we're lazy. No, they are necessarily incomplete. It's not a bug, it's a feature of our economic system. But why?
Okay, so let's dig into this. Hart basically pointed to three core reasons. First, some things are just plain unverifiable. Think about it. How can a judge or a court objectively measure something like best effort or excellent quality? It's often impossible. Second, some actions are non-contractable. You just can't write a legally binding contract that forces an employee to have a brilliant, game-changing idea. And finally, and this is the big one, even if you could, the sheer cost and complexity of trying to imagine and write down rules for every possible future event would be absolutely astronomical. It's just not going to happen.
So this is where Hart's work gets really, really powerful. If we just accept that all contracts have these unavoidable gaps, it brings up a super critical question. When something unexpected happens, something the contract is silent on, who or what fills that void? Let's put it bluntly. In the face of something totally unforeseen, when the rulebook runs out of pages, who gets to decide what happens next? Who has the power to make the call? Hart had the perfect name for this power: residual control rights. This is the right to make the decisions in all those situations that the contract left blank. It's the ultimate power to say, the contract doesn't say anything about this, so I get to decide. And here's the elegant, beautiful leap that Hart made. He argued that these residual rights are the very essence of ownership itself. Owning something, whether it's a factory or a software company, isn't just about holding the title to a physical asset. It's about having the ultimate authority to decide what to do with it when the original plans, the contract, inevitably fall apart. This completely reframes something as common as a corporate merger. So before the deal, you've got two different owners, right? Each one has residual rights over their own company's assets. But after Firm A buys Firm B, bam, the owner of Firm A now holds the residual control rights over everything. It's not just about combining spreadsheets. It's a fundamental shift, a consolidation of decision-making power for all those future what-if scenarios. Okay, so this isn't just some dusty old theory sitting on a shelf. No way. It provides this incredibly powerful lens for analyzing a huge range of real-world stuff, from why companies merge in the first place to really tough debates like whether prisons should be privatized. And the impact was just vast. Hart's work helped explain why firms even exist, how they should finance themselves, and gave us this crucial framework for one of the most heated debates in public policy: privatization. All right, let's walk through the classic example of a prison.
You simply cannot write a perfect contract for a well-run prison because quality is just too fuzzy and hard to verify in court. So if that prison is privately owned, the owner holds the residual control rights. This gives them a really strong incentive to innovate on things they can control and profit from, like cutting costs. The problem is, this can come at the expense of quality, the very thing the contract couldn't protect. The theory basically predicts that the private owner's incentive to slash costs might become too strong.
And you can see this playing out in the real world. This framework helps explain actual policy decisions, like when U.S. federal authorities decided to phase out their use of some private prisons. Why? Well, because reports showed that conditions were significantly worse than in publicly run facilities. A direct, real-world example of that trade-off between cost-cutting and quality.
So, if we zoom out for a second, what Hart gave us wasn't just another theory. It was like he discovered a whole new continent on the map of economics. It fundamentally changed how we see the relationship between simple contracts, giant firms, and the institutions that govern them all.
Before Hart, economists often treated individual incentives and big-picture institutions as two totally separate fields of study. His theory was the crucial missing piece of the puzzle, showing exactly how one creates the other.
And this chart just lays it out so perfectly. On one hand, you've got the micro-level stuff, how individuals and firms behave. On the other, you've got the macro-level institutions, the rules of the game, like property rights and legal systems. What Hart did was build the bridge right between them, showing how the tiny details of a contract, who gets to decide when things go wrong, actually build the massive structures of our entire economy. The micro creates the macro.
At the end of the day, he took institutions from being just part of the background scenery in economic models and put them center stage as a main character. They aren't just the rules of the game anymore. They're the outcome of countless incomplete contracts and a key driver of whether an economy succeeds or fails. Which leaves us with a final thought, and it's a personal one. This powerful idea doesn't just apply to giant corporations or governments. Think about your own life, your job, your business partnerships, even your personal relationships. When things get complicated, when the written and unwritten rules are tested, who ultimately holds the power to decide? Who holds the residual rights? Because the answer to that question, well, it tells you everything about where the real power lies.